Stuck at another red light, the late afternoon sun beating down on the car, I watch Michael drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. 10 years. We'd been married 10 years, and the drive home together felt more like a routine than a shared experience. He glanced at me briefly, a tired smile flickering across his face. Rough day? Just the usual, I mumbled, my eyes drawn to the billboard across the street. A woman with a cascade of blonde hair and a dazzling smile stared back, advertising some new perfume. It wasn't the perfume itself that caught my eye, but the idea it represented. Excitement. Something new. You okay? Michael asked, his voice laced with concern. Yeah, fine, I lied, forcing a smile. He reached across the console and squeezed my hand, a gesture that felt more out of obligation than affection. A pang of guilt pricked at me, quickly pushed down. Where had that spark gone? The phone buzzed in my purse. It was Mark, a new colleague. We'd struck up a connection during a lunch break a few days prior, his easy humor and genuine conversation a welcome change from the office drone. Dinner plans? His text read. My heart skipped a beat. Who's that? Michael asked, tilting his head. Just Mark from work, I replied, shoving the phone back into my purse. Probably wants to catch up on the project. Yeah, well, catch up on it later, Michael said, his eyes narrowing slightly. Let's just get home. The rest of the drive was tense. My mind raced between the mundane details of the day and the unexpected text from Mark. The thought of dinner, a shared meal and conversation that actually sparked something, felt intoxicating. It was a secret, a tiny rebellion against the routine that had become our marriage. Dinner with Michael was quiet. We went through the motions, passing plates and making forced conversation about work and the upcoming weekend plans. He barely noticed my new perfume, the one with the woman with the dazzling smile. Maybe it wasn't that noticeable. Or maybe he just wasn't looking anymore. Later that night, as Michael slept soundly beside me, a gentle rumble announced another text. My breath caught. It was Mark. Drinks after work tomorrow? My stomach clenched with a mix of excitement and fear. This was a slippery slope, I knew that. But the thought of another night filled with laughter and genuine connection was too tempting to ignore. I typed a quick reply, see you then. Then, with a racing heart, I deleted it and typed another, more cautious one, maybe. Busy week. It was a weak excuse, but it would have to do for now. I hit send and turned off my phone, the darkness of the room suddenly heavy with the weight of my secret desire. The next day at work was a blur. Every stolen glance towards Mark sent a jolt of electricity through me. When lunchtime finally arrived, I practically ran to the usual cafe, where he was already waiting with a grin. So, he said, his eyes twinkling, busy week, huh? Shame flushed my cheeks. Something like that, I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. We talked for an hour, not about work, but about books, movies, anything but the dull routine of our everyday lives. The laughter, the easy conversation, it all felt exhilarating. Finally, with a heavy heart, I glanced at my watch. I gotta get back. See you tonight? His question hung in the air, a challenge and a temptation. I don't know, I hedged, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Michael might have plans. He raised an eyebrow. Right, the husband. A flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher crossed his face. Well, if things change, let me know. The rest of the day passed in a daze. Meetings, emails, all of it became a background noise to the pounding of my heart. Michael, oblivious, seemed content with a quick dinner and a few minutes of forced conversation about work. His kiss goodnight felt more like an obligation than affection. Later that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Mark's text arrived. Drinks after work? No excuses. Excitement and fear battled within me. This wasn't a harmless flirtation anymore. It was a line I shouldn't cross. But the thought of another evening with him, of escape from the monotony of my life, proved too strong. With a shaky hand, I typed a reply. All right. I'll try. The next few weeks became a blur of stolen moments. Lunch breaks extended, late night, work calls, fueled by hushed conversations, and meticulously planned meetings that left me breathless and exhilarated. My interactions with Michael grew distant and strained. He seemed preoccupied too, but with what, I couldn't tell. One day, while rushing through the checkout at the grocery store, a text from Mark buzzed in my pocket. I stole a quick glance, a smile playing on my lips. Michael, pushing the cart behind me, noticed. "Who's that?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of suspicion. "Just work," I lied, my heart pounding. "Stressful client." "Uh-huh," he said, a frown creasing his forehead. "Seems like a lot of work stress lately." I avoided his gaze, stuffing groceries into bags with a sense of desperate urgency. This was getting out of hand. The thrill was intoxicating, but the risk of exposure grew with each stolen moment. My once comfortable life felt like a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. Yet, the thought of letting go of the excitement, the validation Mark offered, was terrifying. I was caught in a web of my own making, and the strands were tightening. My birthday arrived, a stark reminder of the growing chasm between Michael and me. He forgot. Completely. No flowers, no card, not even a mumbled, "Happy birthday," in the morning rush. A hollow ache settled in my chest. Later that day, a delivery buzzed at my desk. Inside, a beautiful silver necklace nestled in a velvet box, along with a note from Mark. "Thinking of you. Happy birthday." Shame and excitement battled within me. It was wrong, a blatant disregard for my marriage vows, but the thrill of receiving this secret gift was undeniable. I slipped it under my blouse, the cool metal a hidden touch against my skin. Michael barely noticed it that night. Dinner was another silent affair, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware. He seemed distant, preoccupied with something I couldn't fathom. The following weekend, a text from Mark sent a jolt of fear through me. "New bar downtown. Live music. Drinks?" The name of the bar sent a shiver down my spine. It was the same one Michael and I had planned to go to for our anniversary, a reservation I'd flippantly canceled a few days earlier, claiming exhaustion. My mind raced. Meeting Mark there would be pushing the boundaries of danger. But the thought of a night with him, away from the suffocating silence of our home, was tempting. With a shaky hand, I typed a reply, "Not sure." "Michael. Don't worry about him," came the immediate response. "Just say you need some girl time." Guilt gnawed at me, but the seed of excitement was already planted. Finally, I typed, "All right. Meet you there at 9. The night was a whirlwind. Music, laughter, stolen glances across the table. It felt like a secret world, exciting and thrilling. Yet, beneath the buzz, a gnawing worry echoed in my head. Michael. What if he decided to go to the bar at the last minute? The thought sent a wave of panic through me. Around midnight, the urge to escape the guilt became overwhelming. I mumbled excuses about being tired and hailed a cab home. Stepping inside the apartment, a wave of relief washed over me. Michael was asleep, oblivious. The next morning, laundry day brought its own set of horrors. As I sorted through Michael's clothes, a crumpled receipt slipped from his pocket. The name of the bar, clear as day, stared back at me. My stomach lurched. He'd planned to go there too. That night, as Michael entered the living room, a steely glint in his eyes, I knew the game was up. The necklace, peeking out from under my collar, seemed to ignite the fire within him. He held up the receipt, his voice barely a whisper. "Explain this." Panic choked my throat. Lies tumbled from my mouth, clumsy, desperate attempts to salvage the situation. Yet, with each word, the air grew heavier, the weight of my betrayal settling between us. The facade I'd so carefully constructed began to crumble, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Michael's eyes, usually warm and familiar, burned with a cold fury I'd never seen before. My carefully constructed world, the routine, the comfort, it all crumbled in that moment. Words tumbled out of me, a desperate jumble of excuses and justifications. But they rang hollow even to my own ears. The truth, stark and ugly, was laid bare. Betrayal. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He just stared, the disappointment in his gaze 1,000 times worse than any outburst. Finally, he spoke, his voice laced with a quiet venom. "Get out." It wasn't a request. It was an order, a cold dismissal that sent shivers down my spine. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and stinging. But they felt fake, a performance for an empty audience. The damage was done. I packed a single bag, my hands trembling. The familiar space of our bedroom, once a haven, felt alien and hostile. With a final choked sob, I walked out, leaving Michael and the life we'd built behind. The silence in my empty apartment was deafening. The phone, once a constant source of distraction, lay silent on the table. Panic clawed at me. Mark. I needed to talk to him, to explain, to plead for some kind of support. My fingers fumbled with the phone, dialing his number. It went straight to voicemail. Disappointment turned to dread. I left message after desperate message, pouring out my heart into the void. No response. Days turned into a week. Each unanswered call chipped away at the fragile hope I clung to. The city outside, once a source of excitement, now seemed cold and indifferent. My carefully constructed world had collapsed, leaving me alone in the ruins. Then, a text. My heart leapt as I recognized the number. But the message that followed shattered the last remnants of hope. Don't contact me again. My wife is suspicious. The betrayal cut deep. The revenge fling I'd craved, the escape from the monotony, turned out to be nothing more than a fleeting convenience for him. Shame washed over me, bitter and suffocating. Suddenly, the silence in the apartment wasn't so deafening. It was filled with the echoing sound of my own stupidity. Michael returned, not to talk of reconciliation, but of lawyers. The anger in his eyes mirrored the destruction I felt within myself. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. My savings dwindled as legal fees mounted. The life I'd built, the security, the comfort it was slipping through my fingers, a cruel reminder of the reckless gamble I'd taken. The thrill of the affair, the fleeting excitement, had vanished. All that remained was a bitter taste of betrayal and the overwhelming weight of my own actions. The consequences were real, and they were mine to bear. The weight of the divorce settlement felt like a physical burden dragging me down. The house, once a symbol of our life together, went up for sale. Packing boxes, like silent witnesses, filled the corners, each one a snapshot of a memory, a broken promise. Work became a battleground. The spark I once had, the drive to excel, vanished. Deadlines loomed, reports piled up, and promotions I once considered stepping stones became distant mirages. Whispers followed me through the halls, pitying glances replacing the respect I used to command. The whispers were a constant reminder of my public failure, a megaphone amplifying the shame that gnawed at me from within. The final hearing was a blur. Lawyers droned on, papers were exchanged, and the judge's gavel slammed down, a final blow sealing the broken promises and wasted years. Michael stood across the courtroom, his face an emotionless mask that mirrored the hollowness I felt inside. Moving day was a cold, gray affair. Michael's movers loaded up the remnants of our life, his expression as devoid of emotion as the cardboard boxes they carried. A part of me expected him to break down, to show some sign of what we once had, but there was nothing. Just a cold efficiency in dismantling it all. As I handed him the keys, the finality of it hit me with the force of a tidal wave. This wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was the end of a life I'd built, brick by brick, over the past 10 years. The tiny apartment I found was a far cry from the comfortable home I'd left behind. The dingy walls mocked me with their emptiness, a stark reminder of the dreams that had turned to dust. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the echo of my own regrets. Late that night, curled up on a bare mattress with a single box for furniture, I stared at the flickering light bulb on the ceiling. The phone on the nightstand buzzed, breaking the silence. A text from an unknown number. Thinking of you. Mark. My heart skipped a beat. A flicker of hope, a desperate yearning for some kind of connection, battled with the knowledge, now painfully clear, of his callous disregard. With trembling fingers, I typed a single word, "Why?" and hit send. Staring at the screen, I waited for a reply, the silence in the room suddenly filled with a new kind of tension, a chilling anticipation of what revelations the answer might bring. The phone screen remained dark, no reply from Mark. A cold dread settled in my stomach, a sickening realization that this might be yet another cruel twist of the knife. The affair, the fleeting excitement I'd craved, now felt like a cruel joke, a childish fantasy that had resulted in the destruction of my life. Days bled into weeks, and Mark never resurfaced. The silence from him was deafening, a stark reminder of the consequences of my actions. Social media, once a source of mindless scrolling, became a minefield of torture. Michael's name popped up with alarming regularity, always accompanied by pictures of him, smiling and carefree, with a new woman by his side. The bitterness gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the choices I'd made. Friends, caught in the crossfire of the divorce, began to choose sides. My once vibrant social life withered away, leaving me isolated and alone in my tiny apartment. Work became a daily battle against the urge to simply disappear. Every task felt monumental, every deadline a looming threat. The spark I once had, the drive that propelled me forward, was gone, replaced by a suffocating sense of apathy. Then, one day, a bill arrived in the mail, a stark reminder of the life I could no longer afford. It was a medical bill, a hefty sum for a condition I hadn't even known I had. The doctor's note at the bottom sent a fresh wave of panic crashing over me, symptoms likely exacerbated by chronic stress. The irony of it was a bitter pill to swallow. All that work stress I'd blamed on Michael, the late nights and frantic energy, all fueled by the guilt and excitement of the affair, had masked a deeper issue I'd completely neglected. Staring at the bill, the weight of my choices pressed down on me like a physical force. The lost marriage, the shattered friendships, the dead-end job, all consequences of a single, selfish decision. The thrill of the affair, a fleeting escape from the monotony, had come at a devastating cost. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and stinging. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. It was about a life in shambles, a future filled with uncertainty, and the harsh reality that I had no one to blame but myself. The medical bill lay crumpled in my hand, a stark symbol of the mess I'd created. Shame burned in my gut. Treatment for my condition, a consequence of my own neglect, was expensive, a luxury I couldn't afford on my meager salary from the dead-end job I'd taken to make ends meet. Desperate, I dug out my phone. My finger hovered over my sister's number for an agonizing moment. Reaching out to her meant swallowing my pride, admitting the magnitude of my failure. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, and the last conversation ended in a heated argument. With a trembling breath, I dialed the number. Her voice, when she answered, was hesitant, laced with a coolness that hadn't been there before. I explained everything: the divorce, the job, the medical issue. The silence on the other end stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she spoke. "You can stay here for a while," she said, her voice tight. "But things will be different." Relief washed over me, short-lived but intense. A place to sleep, a roof over my head, it was more than I deserved. Yet, the warmth I'd hoped for, the comfort of family, was noticeably absent. The following days were a blur of doctor appointments and navigating the labyrinthine world of insurance claims. The results were a blow. Treatment was necessary, but the cost was astronomical. Disappointment turned into a cold dread that clung to me like a shroud. Desperate, I reached for my phone again, the number memorized after countless stolen glances during happier times. Mark. My last, pathetic attempt at finding some kind of help. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice choked with a desperation I hated, but the call remained unanswered. The once respected career I'd worked so hard for was a distant memory. Now, I spent my days filing paperwork and answering phones, the irony bitter on my tongue. Each task felt like a punishment, a constant reminder of the life I'd thrown away for a fleeting moment of excitement. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back had tired eyes, etched with worry lines that mapped the contours of regret. The spark that had once lit up my face was gone, replaced by a dull emptiness. Then, another blow. Michael's engagement news made the rounds on social media. Laughter, once a shared joy, now echoed in my ears like a cruel taunt. The image of him, happy and seemingly carefree, with a new woman by his side, sent a fresh wave of despair crashing down on me. The walls of my sister's apartment seemed to close in, suffocating me. I was alone, adrift in a sea of my own consequences, and the future stretched before me, uncertain and menacing. Yet, a tiny flicker of defiance sparked within me. I wouldn't give up. I had to find a way out of this mess, even if it meant starting from the very bottom. Treatment began, a brutal war on my body. Each wave of discomfort fueled a steely resolve. This was my penance, and I'd endure it. My sister tried, but the tension was a live wire. The resentment in her eyes mirrored the pain I'd caused. One night, she delivered the blow. "You need to find somewhere else." Bitterness bloomed, but I couldn't blame her. This burden was mine. With a heavy heart, I left, the familiar replaced by the harsh reality of a homeless shelter. Days bled into weeks. The skyline, once a symbol of ambition, became a distant memory. Yet, amidst the despair, a flicker of hope. The treatment, brutal as it was working. Then, one night, a ghost from the past Mark. Older, worn down, shame clinging to him like a shroud. No apologies, just two broken people bound by a shared mistake. He offered a shared meal, a small gesture in the vast ocean of my despair. We sat in silence, the weight of our choices a heavy blanket. By dawn, he was gone. A single dollar bill lay where he sat, a final, pathetic echo of the fleeting fantasy. Later, the doctor's verdict: remission. Hope in the midst of the shattered remains of my life. My body would heal, but the emotional scars, the lost dreams, those were permanent. Standing on a rooftop, the skyline a monument to the wreckage I created. The affair, a fleeting thrill, had come at a devastating cost. My story is a cautionary tale, a testament to the fragility of trust and the enduring consequences of a single, reckless decision.